Hello, I'm Mr. Furlong, and you're watching Biochemistry Part 2. So this is Part 2 of our video series on biochemical molecules. We started on the last video talking about the first two types, and now we're going to finish up with the last two types. But just as a reminder, remember that organic molecules are all made up of smaller organic molecules that will bond together to form a much larger molecule. So here we see four smaller molecules, remember what we called monomers. Those are the basic building blocks of these organic compounds, forming together to become a larger molecule, what we call the polymers. Now last week we talked about the first two types of macromolecules, of these organic compounds. The carbohydrates, remember those were the sugars, the building blocks were the monosaccharides, and then the lipids, those are the fats. They have two building blocks, glycerol and fatty acids. Today we're going to take a look at the third type, proteins, and then nucleic acids. So let's get started, shall we? For proteins, the building blocks are called amino acids. And here we can see an amino acid on our screen. It's called an amino acid because it has certain features to them. And we're going to take a look at these. First of all, there is a centralized carbon atom in all amino acids. Off of that carbon atom, there is a hydrogen. Off the carbon atom, that centralized carbon atom, there is an NH2 group. All right, this is what's known as an amine group, the NH2. Off to the other side, we see a COOH. This is what's known as an acid group. And so off this molecule, off the centralized carbon, we have an amine group and an acid group, hence the name amino acid. Now this is going to be the same in all the amino acids. What's different is this, we use it with a letter R. This is what's known as a variable group. So this one is going to be different from amino acid to amino acid. Now there are only 20 different amino acids. Here we can take a look at just 6 of them. Notice how in each case they all have that COOH, that's the acid group. There's our amine group. There's that hydrogen. And then the R group, which is what's different. In alanine, it's just a CH3. In valine, we can see that it's a little bit more. We come down to phenylalanine, and we see that it gets even a bigger structure. So that's the one thing that's different in each one of these 20 amino acids. Two amino acids that are bonded together will form a dipeptide. Here again we see the Greek prefix di meaning two, pep in this case referring to proteins. Two amino acids being held together. They are held together by a peptide bond. And so we can see right in here the amine group from one amino acid and the acid group from the other form that peptide bond. If we take a bunch of these amino acids and string them together, we make a polypeptide. Again, poly meaning many. And we have this long chain of amino acids forming this polypeptide. Now, two or more polypeptides now bonded together will make a protein. And so proteins take on these really odd shapes. Here we can see a polypeptide. Each one of those different colors that you see is a different polypeptide chain, and they turn into these squiggly lines, and some of them are folded, and we'll talk more about that here in a second. But in order for a protein to work, the amino acids have to be in the proper sequence. And the sequence then determines the shape of the protein. So for as many different amino acids there are and how many different amino acids we can put together to make a polypeptide and all the different polypeptides we can put together, there's quite a few different types of proteins that can be made. But not all of them are functional. They have to have a specific shape, and the sequence will determine their shape. The shape then will determine the function of the protein. Now, millions of proteins then can be made by changing the number and the sequence of amino acids. So in this particular graph here, we can take a look at different amino acids and different configurations, and you can see even with the same number of amino acids, we can get a variety of different types of proteins. But again, not all of them may be functional. It just depends on what their shape is, if they have a function for us or not. What do proteins do for us? Well, they are the basic structural material of all living organisms. You are mostly made up of protein, minus your water weight. For instance, your muscles are mostly protein. Your hair, your skin, your bones have a lot of protein in it. They make up all these living organisms. They also make up small molecules inside of our cells. Things like enzymes and hormones that can control our metabolism. Here in a few days, we're going to be doing a lab where we'll be taking a little bit in-depth look at enzymes, seeing how they work. The last organic compound that we're going to be talking about are nucleic acids. Now, a nucleic acid is made up of a smaller building block or monomer called a nucleotide. In a nucleotide, there are three parts. First, we have a sugar. And this can be one of two types of sugar, but they're both types of monosaccharides. We also have a phosphate group that's attached to that sugar. Now that is the same in all nucleotides. What's different is the base. And this is a nitrogenous base in these nucleotides. There are 5 different kinds of nucleotides. They are adenine, abbreviated with the capital letter A, thymine, abbreviated with the capital letter T, cytosine, abbreviated with the capital letter C, guanine, abbreviated with the capital letter G, and uracil, which is abbreviated with the capital letter U. Here we have 4 different nucleotides shown below, and you can see that off of the sugar we have the bases. This is the only thing that's different in these nucleotides are what are the bases. Now those two look very similar, but when you take a closer look at them, they are not the same molecules. These nucleotides, though, have to be arranged in a particular order. Now, there are 2 types of nucleic acids. We have DNA and RNA. So I'm sure all of you have heard of DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. The other is RNA, or ribonucleic acid. What do these things do? Well, they do a whole lot for us. They help to control all of our cell activity. So all these things that are going on inside of our cells are all controlled by the DNA and the RNA. It helps us store hereditary information. So all these characteristics that make up who you are is going to be stored, and it will then also allow you to pass on these traits to your children. And as we'll see, it makes all the different types of proteins in our body, and in all living things for that matter. So that completes our discussion on organic compounds. Again, please make sure that you can tell me what the function of all these organic compounds are. You can identify their structure. You can tell me what their monomers are for each one of these. And I'll be giving you a sheet that looks kind of like this for you to complete in class tomorrow. So we'll see you then.